The air in late August in Ohio is thick and heavy, like warm milk. It settles on your skin, fills your lungs, and makes every breath feel like an effort. I'm sitting out on the back porch, in an old wicker chair that groans with every slight movement, as if it's complaining about life right along with me. Creak, creak. It's the same sound the floorboard next to my late wife Mary's side of the bed used to make. 20 years she's been gone, and I still hear it in the quiet. Today is my grandson Jake's birthday. He's turning 12. Inside the house, the one I built with my own 2 hands 50 years ago, music I don't understand is blaring. People whose names I mostly can't remember are laughing, and the whole place smells like something newfangled. Soy burgers, maybe. Or resentment. My daughter, Sarah, her husband, Mark, and their kids have turned my old, sturdy fort into a branch office of some Californian suburb. I don't go in, not because I don't want to, because I know my place. I'm a piece of furniture, an old, time-darkened armchair that's not comfortable anymore, but you feel too guilty to throw it out. A family heirloom, I suppose. So you stick it in the corner and hope it doesn't draw too much attention. Dad, are you coming in? Cake soon. Sarah's voice cuts through the screen door. There's no warmth in it, just the flat, formal politeness of a flight attendant, asking if you want the chicken or the fish. In a minute, honey, I call back. My voice sounds foreign to me, rusted from disuse. I'm not coming in. They know it. I know it. It's our little game. They pretend to ask, I pretend to consider. From my porch, I've got a clear view of the backyard. The lawn is perfectly manicured. Mark's doing. He pays a service for it. I used to cut it myself with an old, sputtering push mower, and the smell of fresh-cut grass was the smell of summer. The smell of home. Now the house smells like an air freshener, mountain fresh scent. I've been to the mountains, in Vietnam. The freshness there smelled different. It smelled like fear, gunpowder, and rotting leaves. Creak. The chair complains again. I look down at my hands. The skin is rough. A road map of wrinkles and liver spots, the nails trimmed short. These hands remember the cold steel of a wrench in December, the heat of an engine after a long haul, and the softness of Mary's hair. With these hands, I built my first Ford F-150 from a heap of scrap metal, raised this house from the foundation to the rafters, changed diapers on 2 kids, and pulled a young man from a wreck on I-71. Now, all they're good for is holding a mug of cold coffee. If I'd known back then that I'd end up a ghost in my own family photos, I would have bought myself a boat instead of buying the kids a house. Sailed it out on Lake Erie, and just fished until I ran out of gas. A burst of laughter erupts from the house. Loud, a little hysterical. I recognize that laugh. It's Mark, my son-in-law. A man whose hands are softer than my daughter's. He's a personal growth consultant, or some such thing. Teaches people how to find themselves and set personal boundaries over Zoom from a room with perfect lighting. All my life, the only things I've set are fence posts and foundations. Seems I built the walls a little too high. The screen door creaks open again. It's Mark. He's wearing fashionable skinny jeans and a t-shirt that says, "Be kind." It's easy to be kind when other people do all the hard work for you. Frank. He never calls me Dad, not even Mr. Sullivan. Just Frank. Like we're buddies who grab a beer at the local VFW. Sarah wanted me to check on you. You've been out here for 2 hours. People are asking. What people? I ask, not turning my head. The wind is chasing a dry leaf across the yard. The first hint of autumn is in the air. Well, our friends, colleagues, they can see you through the window. It looks a little odd. I stay quiet. What can I say to him? That I can't stand being in a room full of happy, carefree people because their laughter feels too loud. That their talk about the latest iPhone and vegan recipes makes me feel like an alien who landed on the wrong planet. That I don't know how to talk to them because all the words I know, words about duty, work, honor, and loss, have gone out of style. Mark shifts his weight from one foot to the other, impatient. The kindness on his t-shirt is starting to wear thin. Listen, Frank. Sarah and I were talking. We really appreciate everything you've done for us. It's the standard opening line. A request or a complaint always follows. I turn to him, look him right in his eyes. They're soft, well-rested eyes that have never seen anything more terrifying than an expired smoothie. But this constant silence, this emotional distance, it's becoming a problem. Our family therapist calls it toxic masculinity. You're creating a tense atmosphere. You don't share your feelings. You don't participate. The kids are scared of you. Jake asked me today why Grandpa is always so mad. Toxic masculinity. The words are sharp and cold, like a bayonet. They pierce right through me, but I don't show the pain. I learned that a long time ago. In Nam, when your buddy is dying in your arms, you don't cry. You clench your jaw, you pick up his rifle, and you keep fighting, because your tears won't help anyone. But your silence might keep the rest of your men alive. Silence is discipline. It's respect for the living and the dead. I'm not mad, Mark, I say. My voice is steady even. I look past him, at the old oak tree I planted when Sarah was born. It's grown tall and strong. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about, he says, throwing his hands up. No reaction. You just shut down. We want you to be a part of this family, Frank, a real part. We want you to talk to us. Tell us how you feel. Instead, you just sit out here alone, like a monument to yourself. It's unhealthy, and it's casting a shadow over our celebration. Casting a shadow. Me. My presence. My silence. I am the shadow in my own home. I slowly push myself to my feet. My knees crackle. My back aches. The chair gives one last protesting creak. I'm a good half-foot taller than Mark, and still broader in the shoulders, even at 68. He takes an instinctive half-step back. All right, Mark, I say, just as quietly. I won't spoil your party. I walk past him without a second glance. I enter the house. The smells, the sounds, the laughter. It all hits me like an avalanche. I see faces turn towards me, curious, judgmental. I walk through the living room, toward the front door. Sarah spots me. Dad, where are you going? We're about to cut the cake. There's panic in her voice. Not for me, for herself, for how this will look to her guests. Her father walking out on his own grandson's birthday party. The scandal. The embarrassment. I stop at the door, grabbing my old Carhartt jacket off the hook. It smells of engine grease, dust, and me. I need some air, I say. It's a lie. They need the lie. The truth is too inconvenient. I step outside. The cool evening air helps clear my head. I walk to my old pickup, a 1998 Ford F-150. Rust has eaten through the wheel wells, and the paint is faded, but the engine runs like a clock. Because I know this engine. I've rebuilt it a dozen times. I understand its language, unlike the language of my family. I get behind the wheel. The key turns in the ignition. The engine coughs to life with a familiar grumble. The headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the neat facade of my house. In the window, I see silhouettes. They're watching me. The ghosts of my life. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just left. Because sometimes silence isn't toxic. It's the only thing you have left. The last line of defense. The last way to hold on to your dignity. I pull out onto the road, leaving the lights of the house that no longer feels like mine behind me. In the rear-view mirror, I see the light in the window go out, and then there's only darkness and silence. A real, blessed silence. The road unwinds before me like a black ribbon. My headlights pick out familiar landmarks from the dark. The old cow-shaped mailbox, the Johnson's leaning barn, the deer crossing sign. I'm driving with no destination, just to be moving. The roar of my old Ford's engine is the only music I need right now. It drowns out the voices in my head. Mark's voice, dripping with condescending pity. Sarah's voice, laced with irritation. Toxic masculinity. I turn the words over and over. They're not just new to me. They feel foreign, like someone trying to describe the taste of the bread I've eaten my whole life using a language I don't speak. They say I don't share my emotions, but my whole life has been one long emotion, just not expressed in words. It was expressed in deeds. Love, duty, care, for me. These weren't abstract concepts from one of Mark's books. They were calluses on my hands. They were the ache in my back after a 12-hour shift at the garage. They were the taste of cheap instant coffee at 4 in the morning because I had to get up and drive to a second job. I turn onto the old state highway. There's almost no one else out here. Just me, my truck, and my memories. They come in waves, sharp and vivid as lightning flashes. It's 1989. Sarah is 17. She's at the kitchen table, sobbing over a college brochure. "Dad, I can't go. It's so expensive. We can't afford it." Mary is hugging her, stroking her hair, and I'm just standing in the doorway, quiet. I look at her tear-streaked face, at her dream about to smash on the rocks of reality. I didn't say a word that night. I didn't promise it would all be okay. I didn't tell her how much I loved her. The next day, I drove into town and sold it. My '68 Mustang. Cherry red with white racing stripes. I'd bought it with my first civilian paycheck after I got back from Nam. I'd spent 3 years restoring it in my garage, every nut and bolt. It wasn't just a car. It was my connection to the kid I was before the jungle. It was my one symbol of freedom, my only luxury. I handed the keys over to some suit who didn't even appreciate what he was buying. He just saw a piece of metal. I saw a piece of my soul driving away. I got $11,000 for it. That same day, I put the cash on the table in front of Sarah. "This'll cover the first year," is all I said. She cried again, but this time from happiness. She hugged me. She never asked where the money came from. She just took it for granted, and I never told her. Why would I? My job was to do, not to talk. I grip the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles turn white. The truck bounces on the uneven asphalt. The headlights illuminate an old gas station. The neon gas sign is flickering, one letter nearly burnt out, just like something inside me. They talk about contributing to the family, as if the only contribution that counts is heart-to-heart talks and group yoga. What about the other kind of contribution? It's 2005. Mark has just married Sarah. He decided to start his own business, something about life coaching. It wasn't so fashionable back then. They were living in a tiny rental, and money was always tight. "We just need a little push, Frank," he'd said to me, looking at a spot on the wall over my shoulder. He could never look me in the eye when he was asking for something. I'd been running my own garage for almost 30 years by then. I had my regulars, a steady, if not huge, income. I put a little away every month for a rainy day for my old age. Mary was gone by then, and I knew I could only count on myself. I took almost everything out of my savings account. $20,000. "This is for the business," I told him, "but it's a loan, not a gift." Mark swore up and down he'd pay me back every cent as soon as he was on his feet. Nearly 20 years have passed. He's on his feet. He bought a big house, trades in his car every 3 years, and I'm still waiting. I never reminded him. A man doesn't have to remind another man of a debt. He expects the other man to remember his honor. I guess Mark's sense of honor is like a carburetor to him. He doesn't know how it works. I drive past the old drive-in movie theater. The screen is blank and black. We used to come here, Mary and the kids and me. We'd watch silly comedies and eat popcorn. Sarah and her brother Michael would fall asleep in the back of my pickup, and Mary and I would sit in the cab, holding hands. It was simple. I understood it. Love was tucking your jacket around a sleeping child. It wasn't about spending hours discussing your feelings. My son, Michael. He moved to Texas about 15 years ago, works an oil rig. He calls twice a year, Christmas and my birthday. We talk about nothing. The weather, the price of gas. I know he's got his own life, his own worries. I'm not bitter. Maybe because he's more like me. He doesn't talk either. He does. He sends money, quietly, when he hears Sarah's in a tight spot. No fanfare. But Sarah's different. She's absorbed this new world, where words are more important than actions. Where you can forget a debt, but lecture your father on how to live and feel. It's 2015. My grandson Jake, Sarah's boy, got real sick. Some kind of bad lung infection. He needed an expensive surgery, and insurance wouldn't cover all of it. Sarah called me, hysterical. Mark was at some potential unlocking retreat in the mountains and couldn't be reached. A real holy man. Unlocking his potential while his son was fighting for breath. I didn't think twice. I had a second pickup truck, newer than this one. Used it for work. I sold it that same day for half of what it was worth to the first guy who made an offer, because they needed the money right away. $6,000. I drove to the hospital and gave the cash to Sarah. She took it without even asking where it came from. She was too wrapped up in her own grief. I don't blame her for that, but later, she never once mentioned it. Jake got better, thank God. Life moved on, and I was left with my trusty old Ford and a hole in my budget that took me nearly a year of working 7-day weeks to patch. I remember sitting in my garage late one night, my hands black with grease, my back aching so bad I wanted to howl. Through the window, I could see my neighbors across the street, having dinner together as a family, laughing. And I thought to myself, what if I had just said no? What if I had said, "Sarah, I don't have the money. You have a husband. Let him solve it." What would have happened then? They would have called me heartless, uncaring. This way, I just became invisible. My sacrifice was so expected, it wasn't even noticed. Like I wasn't a man, but an ATM that's supposed to spit out cash on demand. I was silent for 20 years, but I guess I swallowed more than a man should. All that pain, that unfairness, it didn't just disappear. It got pressed down inside me, into a tight, heavy knot. And now that knot was starting to choke me. My truck is driving down a road that I basically built myself. Not literally, of course, but every inch of this pavement was paid for with my sweat, my time, my sold-off dreams. I paved their way to their beautiful, comfortable life. And now they're telling me I'm walking on that road the wrong way, that my silence is a poison. Maybe they're right. Maybe there is a poison Except it wasn't them, it was poisoning. It was me. I'm driving to nowhere, down a dark highway, and for the first time in years, I don't just feel a quiet bitterness. I feel something else. Something cold and sharp. It was anger. A slow-burning anger, aged like old whiskey. Anger that my love, expressed in 1,000 silent deeds, had been devalued and dismissed as toxic. I pull a U-turn in the middle of the empty road. The tires squeal, and I head back. Not to the house. Not yet. I drive to my garage. My one true sanctuary. A place where things make sense, where metal is metal, oil is oil, and work is work. A place where I can still fix things. And maybe I'll start with myself. The garage greeted me with the smell of cold steel, gasoline, and old dust. It was a smell that always calmed me. It was the smell of order, the smell of a world where everything had a purpose. In here, I wasn't a toxic veteran or a silent ghost. I was a mechanic, a man who knows how to take things apart and put them back together, a man who understands how things work. At least when it comes to engines. I flicked on the light. A single bare bulb cast a trembling glow over the workbench, cluttered with tools, the old pin-up calendars on the walls, and the oil cans stacked in the corner. My kingdom. My fortress. I didn't sleep at all, just sat on an old stool, drinking lukewarm coffee from a thermos and staring into the dark. The memories weren't just hazy images anymore. They were evidence. The pharmacy receipt for Mary's expensive medicine that I'd found in an old box. My work schedule from the year Sarah started college. Not a single day off for 3 months. An old, faded photo of all of us at the lake. The last happy picture. Before the kids grew up and decided they knew better. I didn't feel sorry for myself. No. I felt a deep-seated bitterness, the dull, aching pain of unrequited love. Not for a woman, for my own family. I was a function to them, a pillar holding up the roof. And once the roof is built and no longer leaks, you stop paying attention to the pillar. It's just there, until it gets in the way. In the morning, as a gray dawn seeped through the grimy garage window, the phone rang. Sarah. I stared at the screen of my old Nokia until the ringing stopped. Then it rang again, and again. 35 missed calls. As if the number of calls could change anything, I decided to drive into town, to Dave's diner. I needed real coffee and bacon and eggs. Something real, simple, that I could understand without a family therapist's help. Nothing at Dave's had changed in decades. The same red vinyl on the booths, the same waitress, Flo, who'd been working here since I was a young man. The same crack in the countertop that looked like a map of the Mississippi River. "How's life, Frank?" Flo asked, setting a steaming mug of coffee in front of me. "Same as ever, Flo. Creaking but moving," I replied. It was our standard exchange. It held more warmth and understanding than all the conversations I'd had with my family in the last 10 years. I was eating my eggs, looking out the window at the town waking up. And then I saw them. Sarah's SUV. It pulled up to the bank across the street. She and Mark got out. They looked agitated. Sarah was fiddling with her purse strap, and Mark was talking fast, gesturing with his hands. They went inside the bank. Something inside me went cold. This was the same bank where I kept my meager savings, the same bank from which I had once withdrawn $20,000 for Mark's business. I didn't rush. I finished my breakfast, drank another cup of coffee, paid Flo, and walked outside. My heart was beating steady and heavy, like a sledgehammer. I crossed the street and walked into the cool, quiet lobby of the bank. They were sitting at a manager's desk, their backs to me. I didn't approach. I just leaned against the wall, my arms crossed over my chest, and I waited. I could hear snippets of their conversation. Power of attorney, an elderly man, not quite all there anymore. Be better if we managed his finances, for his own good. Every word was like a hammer blow to my knuckles. Not a sharp crack, but a slow, dull thud. They didn't just want my money. They wanted to strip me of my right to be a competent adult. They wanted to declare me an insane old man so they could get control of the little I had left. And all of it, wrapped in the language of concern. For his own good. Something inside me snapped. A loud, clean break, like an old, over-tightened fan belt finally giving way. The patience was gone. The silence was over. The manager, a young kid in a suit that was too expensive for him, noticed me. His eyes darted from me to Sarah and Mark and back again. Confusion clouded his face. "Mr. Sullivan?" he asked, his voice uncertain. Sarah and Mark spun around. Their faces were a complex mixture of shock, guilt, and annoyance, like children caught with their hands in the cookie jar. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Sarah's voice trembled. "Came to check on my account, honey," I said, walking slowly toward their table. My voice was calm, but there was a new hardness in it, as if the rust had been scraped away, revealing solid steel beneath. "What are you two doing here?" Mark jumped to his feet, trying to plaster on a friendly look. "Frank, what a coincidence. We were just, worried about you. After last night. We thought maybe you needed some help with your paperwork, your bills. At your age, it's easy to get confused." I looked at him, straight into his shifty eyes. "At my age, Mark, I can still tell the difference between help and robbery, especially when it's happening behind my back." I turned my gaze to Sarah. Tears were welling in her eyes. Tears of frustration at being caught, not of remorse. "Dad, you've got it all wrong. We were just trying to help. We're worried you'll do something foolish. Give your money to some scam artist." "So far, the only scam artists I see are sitting right in front of me," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke quietly, almost in a whisper. But that quiet held more threat than any shout could. I turned to the manager, who was watching this family drama with his mouth hanging open. "On what grounds are my daughter and her husband attempting to gain access to my accounts?" The kids swallowed hard. They provided a doctor's note, saying you've been showing signs of cognitive decline. A doctor's note. So they'd planned this. Must be a friend of Mark's, another expert on the human soul. That was the second blow, and it was worse than the first. They didn't just want to rob me, but they wanted to steal my mind, my identity. They wanted to erase Frank Sullivan and replace him with a diagnosis. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my old leather wallet. I took out my driver's license, my veteran ID card. I laid them on the table. "My name is Franklin Delano Sullivan. I am a veteran of the Vietnam War. I own the property at 12 Oak Street. I am of sound mind and body. And these," I nodded at Sarah and Mark, "are my daughter and her husband, and as of this moment, I forbid them, or anyone else, from conducting any transaction related to my accounts or property without my personal presence and written consent." My voice didn't waver. I stared directly at the manager. He just nodded, stunned. Then I looked at Sarah again. Her face was twisted with anger. The mask of concern had slipped, and underneath was the ugly face of greed. "You'll regret this, Dad," she hissed. "We were only trying to help. But you've always been selfish." only ever thinking of yourself." In that moment, something inside me finally died. That small, smoldering ember of hope that they just didn't understand, that they were just misguided. No, they understood perfectly, and they were doing it anyway. I didn't answer. I just turned and walked toward the exit. I wasn't becoming an aggressor, but I had made a decision. It was time to act. Like a man, firmly, quietly, and with justice. When I stepped out of the bank and into the bright sunlight, I felt a strange sense of relief. The heavy knot in my chest was gone. In its place was a cold, clear emptiness, an emptiness that needed to be filled. And I knew what to fill it with. Not revenge, no, restoration. The restoration of justice, and the restoration of myself. Driving back from town, I wasn't aimless anymore. I had a plan. It was simple, clear, and inevitable, like the changing of the seasons. I was no longer a victim. I wasn't an aggressor either. I had become a force of nature, a force that restores a disturbed equilibrium. The first thing I did was pull into my garage. My pickup gave a disgruntled cough as I shut off the engine, as if it sensed my mood. In the garage, everything was in its place, a world of logic and order. I went to the workbench and picked up the phone, the same old flip phone my grandson made fun of. It showed a few more missed calls from Sarah. I didn't listen to them. I found the number in my old address book. Bill Henderson, attorney at law, an old-timer who had handled my father's affairs. He was the kind of man for whom a handshake and your word meant more than 100 pages of fine print. "Frank, what's wrong? You haven't called me since Mary passed." His gravelly voice scraped through the line. "Something's wrong, Bill. I need your help. I want to make some changes to my papers." We set a meeting for the next day. That evening, the phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was slick and oily. "Frank, I think we got off on the wrong foot today. A terrible misunderstanding. Sarah is very upset. We're all just so worried about you." "I'm worried too, Mark," I answered calmly. "I'm worried that my daughter and her husband are thieves and liars." There was a pause on the other end. Then Mark spoke again, his mask gone. His voice had a metallic edge now. "Listen, old man, don't play the righteous saint. You owe us. You owe your family. This house, the money, you can't take it with you. We need it now. It would only be fair. It's your duty to help us." I listened, and I was astonished by this new, twisted logic, where parental love becomes a lifelong debt, where a father's duty becomes an obligation to be bled dry. "I've helped you my entire life, Mark," I said evenly. "I've given you more than you can possibly imagine. My duty to you is fulfilled. As of today, I owe you nothing." And I hung up. I didn't wait for a response. This wasn't a discussion. It was a declaration. But I knew that wasn't enough. They were used to my words meaning nothing, to my silence being ignored. Now, my words needed to be backed by actions. And so I acted. The next day, I met with Bill Henderson. In his dusty office that smelled of old books and integrity, I laid it all out. No emotion, just the facts. The sold Mustang, the money for Mark's business, the money for my grandson's surgery, the attempt at the bank. Bill listened, his fingers steepled over his stomach, his wrinkled face growing darker and darker. "The bastards," he pronounced when I had finished. "What are we going to do, Frank?" "First," I said, "I want to draw up a new will. The house, the land, and everything on it goes to the local VFW post upon my death. All of it." Bill grunted in approval. "Second, I want to formally revoke any power of attorney that might exist in my name. And I want a document drawn up that forbids my daughter, Sarah Sullivan Miller, and her husband, Mark Miller, from making any decisions on my behalf regarding my health or my finances. Done, Bill said, scribbling in his notepad. And third, I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. Mark borrowed $20,000 from me 15 years ago, on his word of honor. I want it back. Bill looked up at me. Without an IOU, Frank? That's next to impossible. I don't have a piece of paper, I agreed. But I have something else. I have my memory, and I have witnesses. My plan was a long shot, but it was the only way to hit them where it would hurt the most. Their reputation. Their pretty facade of a successful, caring family. A week later, a small column appeared in the local paper, the Ohio Chronicle. It was in the Town Life section, under the modest headline, "The Price of a Man's Word." I didn't write it myself. I just told my story to a reporter, a young kid I'd known since he was a boy. I didn't use names. I just described the situation. A veteran, a man who'd worked with his hands his whole life, helps his son-in-law, a businessman, start a company by giving him his life savings. No contract, just a handshake. Years pass. The son-in-law becomes successful, and the veteran never sees his money again. I didn't write about betrayal or humiliation. I just asked a question at the end of the article. What is a man's word worth today? And does it even exist anymore in this new world? In a small town like ours, a story like that spreads faster than a brush fire. Everyone knew who I was talking about. Everyone knew Mark and his coaching, and Sarah, who always looked down her nose at people. The effect was like a small bomb going off in a quiet pond. People called me. Old friends, former customers from the garage. People I barely knew. Frank, we're with you. That Mark fella always seems slick to me. You hang in there, buddy. The real blow landed on Mark. His entire business was built on his reputation, on the image of an honest, understanding mentor. Now that image was cracking. I heard from a buddy that he lost a couple of big clients, that at the country club he liked to frequent, men had stopped shaking his hand. And then came the call from Sarah. She was screaming into the phone, her voice breaking into sobs. What have you done? You've ruined our lives over some damn money. We were going to pay you back. When, Sarah? I asked quietly. When were you going to pay it back? After I was dead, after you had me put away in a home and sold my house. You don't understand. It was for your own good. We would have taken care of you. You weren't taking care of me. You were taking care of my estate. That's enough, Sarah. Just enough. I hung up. For the first time in years, I didn't feel pain or bitterness. I felt a solid, cold certainty that I was right. I wasn't getting revenge. I was just drawing a line in the sand. I was saying enough. I knew this wasn't the end, but it was the turning point. I had taken back my voice, and it turned out to be a lot louder than I thought. I was no longer a ghost. I was Frank Sullivan again, and I was ready for the final battle, not for their love, for my own self-respect. The victory didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like the quiet after a long storm. The air was cleaner, and it was easier to breathe. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt a sense of peace. Sarah and Mark vanished from my orbit. After the newspaper fiasco, they must have figured that fighting me any further would only make things worse for them. Mark mailed me a check for $20,000. No letter, no apology, just a check in an envelope. I deposited it in my bank account, which was now protected from them like Fort Knox. The money didn't bring me any joy. It was a symbol, a period at the end of a long, ugly sentence. I didn't expect them to show up and ask for forgiveness. I knew they wouldn't. People like them don't apologize. They look for someone to blame. And of course, the one to blame was me, the stubborn, old, toxic man who had ruined their perfect world with his old-fashioned ideas about honor and duty. And that was fine. I no longer needed their approval. I went back to my life. But something had changed. The silence in my house was no longer oppressive. It was mine. It was the silence of choice, not of neglect. I started listening to baseball on the radio again, sitting in my creaky chair on the porch. I drove to Dave's Diner, where Flo would wink at me and pour my coffee, saying, "You sure gave 'em hell, Frank." One day, my son, Michael, drove up from Texas, unannounced. His rig looked as big and weathered as he did. He got out, and we shook hands in silence. His grip was firm, like his father's. We sat on the porch, drinking beers out of the bottle. We were quiet for a long time. "Read the article," he finally said, looking out at the oak tree. "Sarah called. She was screaming." "I know," I said. He nodded. "You did the right thing, Dad." And that was all. But in those 5 words, there was more love, support, and understanding than in all of Sarah and Mark's long speeches about feelings and family values. Michael was cut from the same cloth as me. We understood each other without a lot of talk. My garage became my real refuge. But I wasn't just fixing other people's cars anymore. I started a project for myself. Something I'd been thinking about for a long time but had always put off. I drove out to a scrapyard on the edge of the state. I spent hours walking between the rusting hulks of cars that looked like the skeletons of prehistoric beasts. And then I found it. What I was looking for. It was just a shell. Banged up, rusted out, no wheels, no engine. But I recognized the lines, the curves. It was the body of a 1968 Ford Mustang, the exact same model as the one I had sold for Sarah's college fund. I bought it for next to nothing and had it towed to my garage. My neighbors looked at me like I was crazy. What did old Frank want with that heap of junk? They didn't get it. It wasn't just metal. It was my youth, and I was going to bring it back. It was a symbol. I wasn't restoring a car. I was restoring myself. I got to work. Every day, from morning till night. I sanded away the rust, applied body filler, laid down primer. I found an original V8 engine and spent weeks rebuilding it, tuning it to perfection. I ordered new chrome parts, new upholstery for the interior, cherry red, just like the one I'd had. It was a form of meditation. Every turn of the wrench, every tap of the hammer, every stroke of the paintbrush, it all brought me back to life. My hands remembered their purpose. My mind was busy not with grudges, but with wiring diagrams and torque specs. I had old rock and roll playing on the radio in the garage, and I felt almost happy. I started going to meetings at the local VFW post. I'd avoided them before. Didn't want to stir up old ghosts, but now I realized I needed it. The guys there were just like me. Retired firemen, truckers, farmers, men who also spoke the language of silence and deeds. We didn't trade war stories. We just drank cheap coffee, played cards, and understood each other without needing to say much. I wasn't alone anymore. I had found my tribe. Almost a year went by. One spring morning, I rolled it out of the garage. It gleamed in the sun, cherry red with white racing stripes. The engine turned over on the first try, its deep, powerful rumble, the best music in the world. I got behind the wheel. The smell of the new interior mixed with the smell of gasoline. It was the smell of freedom. I drove down the same highway I had once taken in despair. Now, I was just driving, enjoying the road, the sun, and the roar of the engine. When I got back, Sarah's SUV was parked by my house. She was standing by the gate, hesitant to come in. She was alone. No Mark. She looked older. The anger was gone from her eyes. There was only weariness and something that looked like regret. I parked my Mustang next to her car. I killed the engine. We looked at each other through the windows of our cars. Two different worlds. She got out, walked over to me. "It's a beautiful car, Dad," she said quietly. "Yep," I replied. She was silent for a moment. I wanted to apologize for everything." I looked at her. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel any joy at her words either. I just felt that this conversation was about 20 years too late. "I accept your apology, Sarah," I said, because it was the right thing to do. But I didn't say, "It's okay," because that would have been a lie. Could I come in for some coffee?" she asked, a hopeful note in her voice. I looked at my house, at my garage, at my Mustang, at the road stretching out before me. I had won back my self-respect. I hadn't fought to win back their love. I had fought for the right to be myself, and I had won. Should I give her a chance? It was my choice to make. And for the first time in a long, long time, I could make it on my own terms. "All right, Sarah," I said after a long pause. "You can come in. Coffee's on the stove. But I've got to take a drive. Clear my head." She nodded, a look of grateful confusion on her face. And I started the engine again. I didn't know if I had truly forgiven her. I didn't know if we could ever really be a family again. But I knew one thing for sure. I was no longer their prisoner. I was behind the wheel of my own life, with an open road ahead of me. And that was more than enough. I drove, the wind in my face, and for the first time in decades, I smiled. A quiet, calm man's smile. The smile of a man who had gotten himself back.